Okay, great. I see slides were contributed. That's wonderful. So we're going to do presentations, then maybe go out for a group photo, and then next steps, or depending on how fast we go, we do it the other way around. But yeah, this is, oh, I still see some slide editing here. But this is our opportunity to basically have a quick presentation of like what has this group worked on, try to make it, as actionable as possible. And what we're going to do in the next step session, which is after everyone has presented, we're actually going to discuss, okay, would people actually like to pursue this? If so, what would they need? What are the conditions? Are there specific people that they would like to pursue this with? Is anyone interested in potentially like supporting this financially and so forth? But for now, let's just get all the ideas here on the table. And we can do that through those 7-minute presentations that we had before. So without further ado, let's see the first group here. We have Natasha, Robin, Philip, Kaido, Alex, Ryan G, Nick, and Eduardo. Do you have one designated speakers? Are you all going to do it? Robin. Okay, then I will ask Robin up on stage. Thank you so much. And I will give you a 1-minute warning.
How long?
Like it's 7 minutes, and I'll give you.
7 minutes, wow.
Yeah, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning when you're there, and we do some basically the purpose of this is for everyone else. It's not just to red team, but also really to see, hey, I wasn't part of this group. Probably I think it's still a good idea to be working on this. How can I help them? There was a lot of FOMO on joining other groups. This is now your guys' opportunity to help the groups that you couldn't help before with your attendance by making great contributions. Okay, Robin, the stage is yours.
We're doing this first. Okay, so we discussed a number of different issues and options, and then we focused on this one, so this doesn't give full credit to the other things we discussed, just to make sure everybody understands. So we talked about other ways to fix academia and other kinds of issues, but we focused it on one concept. And so the key idea is that at the moment, academics are in this own insular world where it's hard for outsiders to influence them. And so, people hope that they could go get a funder to fund better research, but the funders don't really care. The funders just want prestige out of the process. And so how can we affect the core of this academic prestige process where all the players are playing the game and where's our lever? So the idea is to go after their concept of why they deserve prestige, which is the concept that they are the people who are going to have the biggest intellectual impact in the long run. So if you talk to a person from Harvard about why they deserve to be at Harvard, that's their story. So the idea is to get at that. And so the plan is to make a better measure of what should be their prestige than what they're using now, which is just what they tell about each other. At the moment you say, how prestigious is George? Well, you ask Fred and Sam or whoever are prestigious, and they tell you how prestigious George is, and that's it. And that's hard to break out of. But the idea is, if we could set up groups of historians in a century or more to look at particular areas of research, say, 100 researchers in some area a century before, and we have a whole group of historians that take years to look at that they could then judge the relative prestige that deserved to have been about those people 100 years ago, and that if we can show that that's possible, then we can use that as the anchor for a prediction market today about what that prestige will be later, and that would be a better measure that we might shame them into following. So I just happened to look up Douglas Engelbart's mother of all demos person. His number of citations is less than mine, which is completely unjust. If you're using citations as a measure, that's just all wrong. Any decent historical analysis would give him vastly more influence than me, justifiably, and that's the kind of new measure we want to create. And so if we can make a prediction market that predicts that later measure, and then people can roughly guess it, then the professors today in their own game will look at this price, and they, some of the professors at Harvard will rate high and some will rate low, and then the question will be, why do you have these low-ranked people here who don't deserve to be here because they're not going to be very good things? So they either have to deny that the market is relevant, or if they accept it as somewhat relevant, then they have to influence their behavior, and then they would actually pick people more for roles and grants and everything on the basis of actual long-term influence, and that would be the big win. So to make this work, what we need to do is the first trial you need is actually show that it's possible to hire some historians to look at a century ago or something, and take some research area and actually predict, actually say who deserves how much respect. And we want to like try different approaches to independent groups and see how their greater reliability, how close they are, to show that we have a method. And then once you have a method, then you can start to make prediction markets now to be settled by historians a century from now. And then the next task is to get intellectuals to listen. And one demonstration project we considered was, well, let's just set up a grant where we're going to hire 10 people for some role. We have 10 endowed professorships. We're going to put people in those roles on the basis of these prediction market prices and show people that like this is influential. You can also do a journal where the publications are on the basis of that. On the basis of the market evaluations. And then once you had, like, then you'd try to make these jobs and these journal articles be prestigious on the basis of them actually being predicted to be more influential. And then over time, if they are actually better and more influential, more important, then people will start to believe the market prices, and that would be the win. And how many minutes does that take?
4.
Okay. But anybody else in the group, something I missed that you wanted to make sure was emphasized, because there is time here.
I would add that to get a ground truth on what is meaningful now, one aspect of the proposal is to hire the experts to judge what science over the last 100 years was most effective. And then once that mechanism, once those metrics are understood, propose those for the next iteration to be judged in the future.
Right. So I thought that's what I was saying, but if apparently he didn't think so, that means that I didn't say it very well.
Were the specific KPIs you're talking about? Specific measures is what you're...
Finding the measures, yeah, finding the KPIs. But I just want to emphasize that one group would be hired today
To look at the past, to show that the method could work.
and get some evaluation, and then the market would be applied in the future.
Right. And I mean, a short-term test would be having a market price and then just doing a survey of academics and saying, you know, who do you think is the most prestigious? And then showing maybe that the market predicts prestige ratings 5 years from now better than the survey does or something like that. Are we taking questions here? Is that?
We have 10 minutes.
Is the idea that in 2022 we're going to evaluate 1922 and in 2023 we're going to evaluate 1923? Or is the idea in 1900, 2000, 2100? Is it happening every year we're doing this again? Or is it only once every 100 years do we do this?
We haven't thought through the details. You could like have a new market every 10 years or every 20 years. It's not clear how often you'd want to make a new market on these things.
Someone's also up there.
Okay. Yes?
Yes, sorry for being in the lobby. So one
No, you're higher than us. We agree.
So one question I have is sort of like, okay, so like, what do you kind of ultimately see the purpose of all this like scientific and research activity as being, and like, how exactly does that pursue that? Does that make sense?
So academics themselves, when they justify themselves, they say, we have the best people. Who are the best people? We're the people who will do the most intellectual progress in the long run, right? They will have the most impact. On what subjects? On the things we all agree are important, right? So we're not challenging that so much, right? We're more going to accept the general sense of what topics are interesting, but we're going to challenge them on who actually is most influential in those topics. But you could, I mean, because historians are going to be making a narrow evaluation, like within a field, who was the most influential. They're not going to be very good at evaluating which fields are relative to others. You'd have to have some other process for that, and we didn't come up with one, so we're doing the narrow task we can figure out.
So I just wanted to question your focus on the individual exclusively, because there are communities that can be very important, like Niels Bohr
Right.
and quantum mechanics. So, I mean, that would actually be an interesting case study because it's about 100 years ago, and there's a tremendous amount of letters and correspondence.
Right. So we had an open question about the scope at which the units would be evaluated. You could do the individual paper, or you could do the person, you could do the group, and it's somewhat open what would be the most useful unit.
I mean, in terms of hiring sequelae and so on, the group maybe is a less tangible outcome
Right.
to take action on. But terms of,
In principle, we could do them all.
it could be important.
Right?
I mean, initially, we should just try different things and see what works out better. Like, ask historians which things can you most reliably evaluate after the fact. And maybe if they find it easier to evaluate people or groups, then that would be a reason to do that.
Something that I didn't quite follow is how, I can understand how a historian can look back 100 years and then make a judgment about which participants were most important, but how can, having done that exercise retrospectively, allow them to do it in the present?
Well, they don't do it in the present. They do it a century from now. But we bet now on what they will do in a century.
That's the odds now of what will happen.
So for each person, there's a ranking they get. Higher the ranking, the higher the dollar value of their asset. And then there's a current price for the asset, which is a bet on how high would that future ranking be. And you can buy or sell this asset today to reflect your opinions about whether the price it's mispriced.
1 minute warning, 2 minutes.
Your example of Engelbart shows that citation and prestige are actually two different dimensions. Engelbart does have a lot of recognition and prestige, I would say, in fact, more than any of us in this room. The fact that his citation is low does not contradict that.
Right?
And I think that you put it well, which is what we're trying to get at, is prestige and shaping that with regard to the future. But but you're not asking a question for which the future judges will have an objective metric.
Well, the question is what prestige he had at the time. And so I remember a period when he felt his prestige was quite low at the time, and that the world was misjudging him and not giving him as much attention earlier on. Now his prestige may be sufficiently high, but that's too late for him early on to get funding and attention.
No, you're right, I remember that time too.
But isn't that a reason why what you said won't work? That people can't accurately predict.
Well, people aren't trying very hard to accurately predict the future at the moment. At the moment, they're mainly trying to predict the current prestige environment. That's the main thing people are focused on. We're trying to give them the incentive to predict the thing they should be predicting, a better incentive. Anyway, I think my minute must be up, right?
Yeah, but while I'm trying to wrangle this beast, you can take one more question.
Okay.
So one question is why 100 rather than, I mean.
It's an open, it's a
A placeholder value for the variable. Like, we should let historians evaluate different times in the past and let us tell them how does their reliability change with time, right? There might be a knee of the curve where the reliability falls fast and then it falls slower after that, and you pick the knee of the curve or something. But we need to do a lot of experiments here.
Okay,
Now time's up.
now we go. Thank you, Robert. Woo!